Hello everyone, welcome to lesson 14. We're going to be talking today about the Israelites crossing the Red Sea and then God providing manna and quail in the wilderness. We're on page 50 of the workbook. I'll get us started by reading the introduction at the top of that page. After the plague of the firstborn, from which the Israelites were spared by the blood of the Passover lamb, that's what we talked about in the last lesson, Pharaoh ordered the Israelites out of Egypt. The Egyptians gave them money to get them out of their country. But, as happened before many times, Pharaoh had a change of heart, and he pursued the Israelites. And that's where we'll pick the story up. First, though, just looking at the timeline, we're still right around the year 1446 BC, picking the story up right where we left it last time. Okay, so let's do that. Let's pick the story up. We are going to be reading, first of all, from Exodus chapter 12, verses 31 to 42. And then Exodus chapter 13, verses 17 through 22, and Exodus chapter 14, verses 1 through 31. So kind of jumping around and hitting the highlights of the story. And here's what we're going to see. After the 10 plagues, Pharaoh had had enough and ordered the Israelites out of Egypt. But God was with his people visibly with miracle-working power to rescue them. So let's read about that. Please read those verses from Exodus 12 and 13 and 14. All right, let's go to the questions. Question number 1. Why did Pharaoh and the people of Egypt want the Israelites to go? They've been working so hard to keep the Israelites. Pharaoh certainly has, but now suddenly they want the Israelites to go. Why? Why did Pharaoh and the Egyptians want the Israelites to go? Well, they were afraid that if the Israelites stayed, that everyone in Egypt would die. Here they've just experienced the death of all of the firstborn sons, and they're afraid if it keeps going this way that they're all going to die. And so this finally is what convinces them to let the Israelites go. Number 2. They didn't have time, the Israelites didn't have time to make bread dough with yeast. So the bread they baked was unleavened. What is unleavened bread like? Discuss that, see if you know what unleavened bread is like. So unleavened bread, I'm not sure if you've had unleavened bread before or not, but unleavened bread is flat, is dense. It's not light and fluffy like the bread that we're used to. Yeast really is what causes the bread to rise to get nice and fluffy, lots of little air bubbles in the bread. That's caused by yeast, and I'm not an expert on baking, not at all. But my understanding is you put a little bit of yeast in the dough and you let it sit for a while, and that yeast does its work, and it causes the dough to rise and get nice and light and fluffy, and then you bake it. And that process takes a while of the yeast working its way through the dough. And so the point here is that the Israelites, they don't have time to, set their bread aside, let the yeast work and have it rise and then bake it. They they are in a rush. They are in a hurry to get out of Egypt, and so they are eating unleavened bread, which is flat and dense. And I think this is a question here. We spend time talking about this for a couple of reasons. First of all, this became part of the Passover celebration, eating unleavened bread. And the Passover celebration is the meal during which Jesus instituted Holy Communion. And so still today, in the sacrament of Holy Communion, we eat unleavened bread, which is just a flat wafer, not fluffy at all. So we still use unleavened bread in Holy Communion because of this connection to the Passover and what happened with the Israelites all those years ago. But this is also important to remember because this becomes a picture for the way that sin works. The Bible, in a number of places, talks about how sin spreads and grows, just like yeast in a little bit of dough. You put a little bit of yeast in the dough, and just that little tiny bit of yeast is very, very tiny. It works its way through the entire lump of dough, and the same thing with sin. Even just a little bit of sin in our hearts gradually grows and spreads into our words, into our actions. That's a common picture in the Bible. And so that's good for us to keep in mind also. Okay, number 3, what did the Israelites receive from the Egyptians? So if you remember back to the last lesson, this is something that God had told the people would happen. This last plague will be so severe that the people will pay you just to leave, basically, and that's exactly what we see here. The Israelites receive gold and silver and clothing. The Egyptians are saying, just take whatever you want and get out. That's how desperate they were for the Israelites to leave. And so the Israelites are leaving with lots of supplies, lots of wealth, and that wealth will eventually go towards building the tabernacle. We'll get to that in a lesson or two, I think. Okay, number 4, how long had it been since Jacob's family arrived in Egypt? See 12 verse 40. So it had been 430 years since Jacob and his family had arrived in Egypt. You remember how that all took place with Joseph there in Egypt, second in command, and inviting his father Jacob and his brothers to come and live there in Egypt, where they would be taken care of. That was 430 years before before the Exodus. Exodus means the going out from Egypt. That's a long time. That's almost twice as long as the United States has even been a country. So they were there in Egypt for a very long time. Um, but now the time has come for them to leave. And again, that's what the word Exodus means. We've been reading from the book of Exodus. Exodus is a Greek word that means leaving, going out. And maybe while we're talking about it, I should just mention the book of Genesis, which we were reading from quite a bit. The word Genesis, that means beginning. So it makes sense. First book of the Bible talking about the beginning of the world, the beginning of the promise of the Savior. Genesis, and now here Exodus, the people leaving Egypt. Okay, number 5. How did God make his presence known to the Israelites as they traveled? See chapter 13, verses 21 and 22. God makes his presence known by leading them in a pillar of cloud, smoke, and fire. During the day, the people see mostly the cloud, the smoke. At night, they see the fire burning within the smoke. Um, and the Lord Himself, God Himself, is there in that pillar. We see later on that the Lord looks down on the Egyptians from this pillar of smoke and fire. So it's the Lord Himself who is there. The angel of the Lord, we've met Him before. Really, it's Jesus. Jesus is there leading the people, um, literally clouded by this cloud of fire and smoke. But He is there in a visible form, leading the people on their way out, which is a pretty remarkable and special thing. Number 6, what problem did the Israelites quickly run into after leaving Egypt? What problem did they run into? They ended up pinned between the Red Sea and Pharaoh's army. There's a helpful map there on page 50 that kind of helps you to picture their route and where they were going and where it was that they were trapped. So Pharaoh, he comes to his senses, so to speak, and decides, wait a second, why did we let them go? I don't want to let them go. Um, I want to keep the Israelites as slaves. And so he changes his mind again, and decides to chase after the Israelites to go and get them and bring them back. And so Pharaoh's army is closing in on them from the west. To the east is the Red Sea. And that map on page 50 is pretty good, but it kind of makes it look like they could have just gone a little bit further north and gone around. But really, the Red Sea and some of its tributaries and so on extended pretty far to the north, not quite so clear cut as the map shows there. You can look at other maps too to get kind of an idea. Um, but in any case, they have the Red Sea on one side, they have Pharaoh's army on the other side. What are they going to do? Number 7, what was God's solution for Moses to save his people from destruction by Pharaoh's army? How does God come to the rescue? So what does God do for his people? God miraculously parts the water of the Red Sea. Um, a wind blows through the night and miraculously clears a path for God's people through the Red Sea. This must have been something pretty amazing to see, to have a wall of water on your left and a wall of water on your right, and to cross through on dry land. Would have been pretty amazing to witness and to experience. Number 8, what's truly amazing is not only that the Red Sea parted, but how completely God worked this miracle. The ground wasn't even muddy. The ground, the bottom of the sea floor, was dry. What would have been the problem if they had crossed over on muddy, mucky ground? So you can maybe imagine um, that the bottom of the sea floor might be pretty muddy and mucky and hard to cross. Not only for people, but especially imagine animals, oxen, and so on, pulling carts loaded with all of the people's possessions and supplies, tents and food and water and everything else that they packed, loaded onto carts, being pulled by animals, wheels getting stuck in the mud and so on. It would have been extremely hard, extremely slow going to do this. And so God, he goes all the way. He doesn't just part the waters, but also make sure that the seafloor is dry so they're able to cross the Red Sea easily. And then number 9, how did God finally completely rescue his people from Pharaoh? What happens to Pharaoh's army? So what happens to Pharaoh's army? The Egyptians, of course, they rush into the Red Sea to catch the Israelites. The Lord looks down on them from this pillar of fire, and the soldiers and the animals are terrified. God makes it so that their chariots start falling apart. They're stuck there in the middle of the Red Sea, and then the walls of water collapse, and the army is destroyed. The army is drowned, and the Israelites are on the other side, out of Egypt, safe from the army. They are finally completely free. God kept his promises to his people. All right, let's then go to Exodus chapter 16, 1 through 35, and chapter 17, 1 through 7. As the Israelites set out from the Red Sea, they quickly realized they didn't have enough supplies for any sort of extended stay or journey. But once again, God miraculously provides for them. He provides for their physical needs. He gives them what they need for their journey. So let's pause the video and read Exodus 16, 1 through 35, and Exodus 17, 1 through 7. Okay, thank you. Let's look at the questions. Question number 10. As they journeyed away from Egypt, what did the Israelites fear, according to 16 verse 3? So what are the Israelites afraid of? They are afraid that they're all going to starve to death. They did bring, I'm sure, some food with them, but that food probably wouldn't last too long. As they're making their way slowly across the desert, walking all day. I'm sure that they worked up quite an appetite. Wouldn't have been too long before their food supplies were running out, and they're afraid they're going to starve there in the desert. And number 11, why was the way that they expressed their fear inappropriate? So it's understandable that they see their food supplies running out, and they recognize that that is a problem, an issue. We all would see that as a problem. Um, but why was the way that they expressed their concern such a problem? What was wrong with the way that the people expressed their concerns? Well, they could have, they should have gone to Moses and said, Moses, we are sure that the Lord knows our concerns, knows our problem. We are quickly running out of food, and yet we trust that the Lord will provide for us. We know that He will take care of us. But that's not what the people did. They grumbled and complained. They made it clear that they did not trust in the Lord to provide. They did not think that Moses knew what he was doing. So they grumbled and complained against God, against Moses. Um, they rather than expressing trust in the Lord, they show that they really don't trust in Him. Number 12, how did God promise to provide for their needs? So, despite the grumbling of the people, I think, if I were God and people were grumbling like this, I would say, well, fine, figure it out yourselves. If you don't think that I can take care of you, then I won't take care of you. That's how I probably would have reacted. But God promises to take care of them. He told them that He would provide them with meat in the evening and bread in the morning, that He would give them food to eat. And number 13, was God faithful to that promise? Well, whenever the question is, was God faithful to his promise? The answer is always yes, absolutely. And here again, God did exactly what he promised. He promised them meat every evening, and there is quail all over the place. Plenty of quail to eat. I've never eaten quail meat. Maybe you have. Um, I'm not sure how good it tastes, but it was exactly what they needed. Good protein to keep them strong for this trip through the desert. He gives them bread every morning in the form of manna, and maybe we should talk more about this manna. So number 14, the Hebrew phrase that in English is translated "what is it" has been transliterated into English as manna. So in other words, the people see these flakes on the ground in the morning, and they say manna, manna. And in Hebrew that means what is it? What is it? Manna, what is it? And from that, we get our English word manna, which is just that same word that they were saying, which means what is it? What is it? So this is what is it bread? What does that tell you about the bread that God provided for his people that they called it what is it bread? So what does it tell you about this bread that people are saying, what is it? What is it? Well, the people had never seen this type of bread before. This is a unique kind of bread that God provided for them in a miraculous way. These sweet flakes, it seems like. That people are able to eat just plain, or they can boil them and mash them, do all sorts of different things with these flakes of bread. This is miraculous bread, bread from heaven. Number 15, as the people continued to travel now with plenty of bread and meat to eat, what was the next problem that they faced? It was always something. What was the next problem? So the next problem that they face is no water. They don't have any water to drink. So I'm sure they brought some water with them. They probably were able to find water along the way, little streams and creeks and springs and so on. But once they get further out into the desert, further away from civilization, the water they brought with them has run out. Not as many little springs and streams and so on that they can get water from. So now they're afraid that they are going to die of thirst. They have no water to drink. Number 16, though, once again, what was the problem with their request, or the way that they made their request for water? So you might think, you might expect, you would hope that the Israelites would say to themselves, well, hey, remember a few days ago when we all thought we were going to starve to death, and then God miraculously provided for us everything that we needed? I bet he'll do that again. I think we can trust in him this time to provide water for us. But that's not what the Israelites do. Again, they grumble and complain rather than trusting in God, praying to Him for help. They again are grumbling against God, grumbling against the leaders, Moses, that God had provided. Um, and it's easy for us to be hard on the Israelites for this. That they go from crisis to crisis, and they never really learn that they can just trust God. But in a lot of ways, that describes us too. I think we get into some kind of crisis, whether it's a real crisis or maybe it's just something that seems like a crisis to us, and we complain against God. God, why did you let this happen? God, why aren't you helping me? And then all of a sudden, the crisis is over and past. And then sooner or later, something else comes along. And instead of stopping to think, you know what, God helped me last time, I'm sure He's going to help me again, we just go right back to the worrying and complaining and so on. We do the same sort of thing sometimes. Number 17, how did God provide water for the people to drink? God provides water by instructing Moses to take his staff and to strike a rock with it. And when Moses struck the rock, water came gushing forth, and God miraculously provided his people with water to drink from this rock. That's probably the last place you would expect to get water from, right? From a rock. But God, in His power and in His love, He makes this rock flow with water. Number 18, when the Israelites grumbled against Moses and Aaron about food and water, what did Moses say they were actually doing? Review 16 verses 7 and 8. So the people weren't just grumbling against Moses and Aaron. Moses makes it clear. We have been sent by God. We have authority from God. We represent God. And so if you grumble and complain against us, really you are grumbling and complaining against God. And that brings us to number 19 then. God provides us with His representatives in our homes. That would be mom and dad. In the church, that would be leaders like pastors. In the government, we have leaders in the government. In our nation, so the president, for example. Locally, the mayor, and so on. In the state with the governor as well. With what attitudes are we to listen to what they say, whether it's God's representatives in the home, mother and father, or in the church, pastors in the government, president, governor, mayor? With what attitudes are we to listen to what they say? Review the fourth commandment below. It's printed there for you on page 52. What does that say about how we are to treat those that God has put in authority over us? What does the fourth commandment have to say to us about the way that we treat God's representatives? We are to speak positively about them and respectfully listen or speak respectfully to them, listening and obeying them with love. So this is the honor that God commands us to show to all those who He has placed over us, who have authority over us, because they are representatives of God. And just like the Israelites, we unfortunately break this commandment all the time, don't we? Grumbling and complaining about our parents, maybe, or about church leaders, about leaders in the government. We do that a lot, I think, grumbling and complaining about the government, rather than treating them with honor and respect and love. And this is something we'll come back to the fourth commandment next year and talk more about it, but an important reminder for us. Okay, number 20. In the fourth petition of the Lord's Prayer, we ask God for daily bread. What is daily bread? The fourth petition is printed for you on page 53. When we say, give us today our daily bread, what exactly are we talking about? So with the manna, God very literally gave to the Israelites daily bread. He gave them bread every day. But as we see in the fourth petition here, it goes way beyond just bread to eat each day. Daily bread really includes everything that we need for our lives in this world, and we have a whole long list of things there, right? Food and drink and clothing and shoes and house and home, land, cattle, money, goods, and so on. So daily bread is much bigger than just, asking God to give us a slice of bread each day. We are asking God to give us everything that we need for our lives that day. All right, number 21. God promised to provide for the Israelites. He did with the manna, quail, water from the rock. God also has promised to provide for our physical needs. We can be absolutely sure that He's going to do that because He has promised to do that. What's the difference between providing for our needs, though, and providing for our wants? Take some time to discuss the difference. So what's the difference between providing for our needs and providing for our wants? Well, God promises, absolutely promises, that He will give us what we need. And we see that every single day. God gives us what we need. And to be honest, God gives us a whole lot more than just the basics that we need. What do we truly need? Well, we need a little bit of food each day, but God provides us with refrigerators full and pantries full and grocery stores full of all sorts of different kinds of food to eat. We need maybe one set of clothes to wear, but I don't think any of us have just one pair of pants, one shirt to wear each day, or anything like that. We have lots of clothes. We need some small one-room shelter just to keep us out of the weather. You think of the pioneers, for example, who settled here on the Great Plains, and they would build just little, dig a one-room little shelter into the side of a hill. That's what we need to survive, but God gives us comfortable homes to live in. So God gives us way more than just the very basics that we need, and that's because of his generosity and love for us. But God doesn't necessarily promise to give us every single thing that we want. There are lots of things that we might want in life, but God doesn't necessarily provide us with everything that we want. I might want $1 billion, a private jet to be able to fly all over the world, and things like that, a mansion to live in. I might want those things. God doesn't necessarily promise to provide those things to me, because he knows that those things might not be in my best interest. If he gave me $1 billion and all of these riches and wealth and so on, he knows I probably will start loving that wealth more than I love him. I'll trust in my possessions more than I trust in him, and so on. So God gives us what we need. God gives us what is best for us, but not necessarily everything that we want. And that's a good thing, that he doesn't give us everything that we want. Kids who get absolutely everything that they want end up pretty spoiled and rotten. And God doesn't want that to happen to us. Okay. Key questions then. A, once they left Egypt, how did God rescue his people from Pharaoh's attempt to bring them back? God parted the Red Sea, allowed them to cross safely, and then he drowned Pharaoh's army. B, how did God provide special food and water as his people were in the wilderness after leaving Egypt? He gave them bread in the morning, meat in the evening. He gave them water from a rock. He took care of all of their needs. And C, how does God provide for our needs today? He promises to give us everything that we need. And usually God doesn't give us the things that we need in miraculous ways like he did for the Israelites. He doesn't send food raining down from the sky. He doesn't provide water, gushing from rocks out of nowhere, things like that. God usually provides for our needs in natural ways. So he gives you parents who work for a living to earn money to buy food for the family and clothes for the family and provide shelter for the family and so on. He provides us with the skills and abilities and energy and strength that we need to work. He provides for us farmers who grow food, and factory workers who make the things that we need, and so on. So usually God provides for us in natural ways, not in miraculous ways. But whether it's natural or miraculous, God gives us what we need each day. Okay, and then the assignment. A couple of things from the Catechism to work on. There is the fourth commandment, honor your father and mother. Please work on getting familiar with that. And then also the fourth petition of the Lord's Prayer. Please work on getting that down. There's that long list of things. It'd be good to start learning that at least. No Bible passage this time. Please be able to answer those key questions for lesson 14. And then some things to read in the Catechism there, pages 68 to 74, and then 267 to 272. As always, get in touch if you have any questions or concerns. But otherwise, that'll do it for this lesson. So have a great day, and God bless.